You have never made a single choice that was fully your own, not one. Every decision you've ever made was quietly co-signed first by an invisible panel of judges, parents, strangers, co-workers, people who are dead, people who don't even think about you. And you handed them the pen without ever noticing you did it. Watch yourself the next time you speak in a room. You'll catch it. The words leave your mouth, and before you even register what you meant, your eyes are already searching faces for verdict. A nod, a smile, anything. And when it doesn't come, something in you quietly dies for a second, even if no one else sees it happen. This is the quiet architecture of approval seeking. It runs beneath most of our decisions, so deeply embedded that we rarely question it. We call it being agreeable. We call it being a team player. We call it kindness. But underneath those comfortable labels is something more unsettling. A nervous system that has learned to outsource its sense of safety to other people. Psychologists and philosophers across centuries have circled this same wound. Carl Jung called it living through the persona, the mask we construct to be accepted by the tribe, until we forget the mask is a mask at all. The Stoics, centuries earlier, warned of a different but related trap. They called it being enslaved by externals, chained to the opinions of others, as though those opinions were fact. And modern psychology has given it a simpler name, the fawn response, a survival strategy where we shrink, please, and adapt in order to avoid conflict or rejection. The cost of ignoring this pattern is not small. It's not simply a matter of being a people pleaser. It is the slow erosion of your own internal compass. Over years, this habit trains you to no longer know what you actually think, feel, or want, because every instinct gets filtered first through the question, will this be accepted? And a life lived this way is a life spent perpetually auditioning for approval that was never guaranteed to come and never truly satisfies even when it does. So today we ask a different question. Not, how do I become more likable, but something harder and ultimately more freeing. How does a person actually stop needing approval altogether? This is the terrain of what's often called in modern language the Sigma mindset. Not a costume of coldness or isolation, but something older and more psychologically real, the reclamation of your own internal authority. The first insight, approval. Seeking is a learned survival strategy, not a personality trait. Before we can dismantle this pattern, we have to understand where it came from. No one is born checking the room for permission to exist. This behavior is trained, usually in childhood, in environments where love or safety felt conditional. A child who is only praised when they perform well learns quickly and wordlessly that their value is transactional. A child whose emotions were met with irritation learns to hide them. Over time, the nervous system adapts. It learns that seeking approval is not a preference. It is a strategy for staying safe. This is important because it means the adult who compulsively seeks validation is not weak. They are running a program that once kept them protected. The tragedy is that the program rarely gets updated. We carry childhood survival strategies into adult environments where they no longer serve us, responding to a boardroom or a relationship as though it was still the household we grew up in. The second insight, the persona becomes a prison. Carl Jung's concept of the persona describes the social mask we present to the world, shaped by what we believe will be accepted. In small doses, the persona is useful. It lets us function in society, adapt to different contexts, and cooperate with others. But Jung warned of a specific danger. When a person begins to identify entirely with the persona, mistaking the mask for the self. This is what happens to the chronic approval seeker. The mask grows so convincing, so habitual, that the person underneath it begins to atrophy. They no longer know what they'd choose if no one were watching. Ask them what they actually want. Separate from what impresses others, and there is often a long, uncomfortable silence. Not because they're hiding the answer, but because the question has genuinely never been asked. Breaking from approval seeking, then, is not about becoming harsher or more distant. It is about slowly, deliberately, peeling the persona back far enough to remember who was underneath it all along. The third insight, Marcus Aurelius and the discipline of indifference to opinion. The Stoics offer a strikingly modern remedy to this ancient wound. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire and surrounded constantly by flatterers, critics, and demands, wrote privately to himself about the uselessness of chasing the good opinion of others. He reminded himself again and again that other people's judgments are not within his control and therefore not worth his peace of mind. This is the Stoic discipline of the dichotomy of control. Some things are ours to command, our thoughts, our choices, our responses, and some things are not, including what other people think of us. To live well, the Stoics argued, is to stop investing emotional energy into the things we cannot govern. This is not indifference to others in the sense of cruelty. It is indifference to their opinions as a source of self-worth. A person practicing this discipline can still love deeply, still care about the people around them, but they no longer require agreement or admiration to feel grounded. Their sense of self stands independently, the way a tree stands regardless of whether the wind praises or criticizes its shape. The fourth insight, the shadow of the people-pleaser, is rage. Jung taught that whatever we suppress does not disappear. It goes underground into what he called the shadow, and it returns distorted in ways we don't expect. For the chronic approval seeker, the shadow is often rage. Think of the person who agrees to everything, who never says no, who absorbs the needs of everyone around them without complaint, and who then, seemingly out of nowhere, erupts in resentment, or grows cold and withdrawn, or sabotages a relationship they claim to want. This is the shadow surfacing. Every unspoken no accumulates somewhere. Every swallowed disagreement becomes a debt the psyche eventually collects. This is why simply trying to be nicer or care less almost never works as a long-term fix. It treats the symptom while ignoring the pressure building underneath. The real work is learning to express boundaries and disagreement in the moment, so the shadow never has to carry what the mouth was too afraid to say. The fifth insight, silence as a form of sovereignty. There is a particular kind of strength in a person who no longer feels compelled to explain, defend, or justify every decision they make. Not because they are hiding something, but because they no longer treat other people's understanding as a requirement for their own peace. The Stoics practiced a form of this through restraint of speech, understanding that not every thought needs to be spoken and not every accusation deserves a response. Silence, used this way, is not avoidance. It is a refusal to hand your emotional equilibrium to whoever happens to be questioning you. This is often mistaken for coldness by people who are used to being fed constant reassurance. But there is a difference between a person who is absent and a person who is simply no longer negotiating their worth. The Sigma disposition, at its psychologically healthiest, is not about isolation. It is about no longer requiring an audience to know who you are. The sixth insight, self-trust, is built the same way. Approval seeking was, through repetition. If approval seeking was trained into you slowly, through years of small moments where you learned to prioritize others' reactions over your own instincts, then self-trust must be rebuilt the same way. Not through a single dramatic transformation, but through small repeated proof. Every time you make a decision and honor it, even a minor one, even one no one else will notice, you are casting a vote for a different internal identity. Every time you tolerate the discomfort of someone's disapproval without abandoning your position, you are proving to your own nervous system that disapproval is survivable. Over time, this evidence accumulates into something that starts to feel, for the first time, like solid ground. This is slow work. There is no shortcut that bypasses the discomfort of disappointing people you care about, or the temporary anxiety of setting a boundary you've never set before. But each instance weakens the old program a little further. The seventh insight, the subconscious root. You were never actually choosing for yourself. At the deepest layer of this pattern lies a quiet, often unspoken belief that your authentic self, if fully expressed, would not be acceptable. This belief usually formed long before language, in the earliest years, when a child's entire survival depended on the goodwill of the adults around them. To need approval at that age was not weakness, it was biology. But that belief, formed in dependency, does not automatically expire once we become adults capable of surviving on our own. It has to be consciously examined and eventually replaced. The work of reclaiming your own authority is, at its root, the work of finally believing that you no longer need to earn your right to exist as you are. This is where the Sigma mindset departs from mere social strategy and becomes something closer to psychological integration. It is not a performance of independence. It is the actual internal experience of no longer needing permission. What we have traced today is not a personality type to imitate, but a psychological pattern to understand and eventually to outgrow. Approval seeking was never a character flaw. It was a strategy, born of necessity that outlived its usefulness. And the path beyond it is not coldness or isolation or indifference to others. It is the quiet, hard-won return of your own internal authority, built not in a single moment, but in 1,000 small choices to trust yourself before you look to anyone else. Which part of this pattern do you recognize in yourself? The persona you've built to be accepted, the shadow of resentment building underneath old agreements, or the quiet silence of someone learning for the first time to stand without needing applause? Let me know in the comments. If this exploration resonated with you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the psychology of the self, drawing from Jung, the Stoics, and the quiet architecture of who we really are beneath the mask.